Hello and welcome to Bulela Podcast. My name is Ingotu and I have a special guest for you this week. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did making it. Remember, you can find Bulela Podcast on Facebook, on Instagram. Check the description box for links to previous episodes as well as where you can find today's guest.
Enjoy. Hi, Notu. Thanks so much for inviting me onto the Bulela podcast. It's a pleasure to speak about my music a little bit and to share a little bit about my process and my thoughts with you all. So I am not a regular listener to the Bulela podcast. I've listened to a few episodes and really enjoyed what I've heard, but I'm not. It's not because I'm not a regular listener of your podcast. It's because I'm generally not a regular listener of any podcasts. I don't have a lot of time on my hands at the moment. I am a mother to two young kids and kind of balancing that with trying to work through and navigate the music career as an independent musician just takes up a lot of time and a lot of energy. So as the kids start to get bigger, I'll have more space to listen and dive into the wealth that is online. But what I have enjoyed listening to particularly was your podcast about the witch. I loved your reaction. I just thought it was so authentically excited and so and it's great when we can celebrate, the people who have helped to form the today of the musical landscape in Zambia, and it's just really nice to be able to celebrate the resurgence of the witch, of Jaggery Chanda, and that band and their music, and I really felt very alive listening to that episode. So that was a real joy for me, especially because I think I listened to it around a time when I was feeling we'd had a death in the family, and it was a pretty sad time for us, and I was feeling saddened by a lot of things, and it kind of really was a little ray of light into my landscape. So that was joyful and joyous. So my name is Namvula. I am a singer, I'm a songwriter, I am a workshop leader as well, a facilitator. And I write songs that kind of traverse different genres. I think it can become quite difficult to box my music in to one specific genre, but what I enjoy exploring is a combination of jazz, the freedom of jazz. I enjoy folk music and traditional music, roots music, and I like taking elements of that. I'm part Scottish and part Zambian, so I enjoy exploring the folk side of kind of British folk, and the lyricism in that, and the kind of roots side of Zambian music and traditional side of Zambian music. I enjoy a lot of left field pop, and so the latest EP is kind of a real combination and culmination of all of those musical landscapes and territories that I navigate, and really is an expression of my upbringing. I was brought up in the diaspora. I listened to a lot of different music when I was growing up. I absorbed a lot of different musical styles. I enjoy a lot of different music. And I'm not particularly bound to listening to a particular style of music. I like hip hop, I like soul, I like pop, I like folk, I like some rap, I like some rock. So really, yeah, my musical, and I love jazz and my musical interests are so broad and varied, and I think that all reflects back into the music that I make. I am based currently in Oxford, in the UK. We have been here full time for the last 3 years since our first son, started school, just after the pandemic. I was born in Zambia, but brought up abroad, largely abroad, in different continents, different countries. But my constant in my life as a child of the diaspora has been Zambia, has been returning back home yearly, has been my connection to my family there, and to friends there, to the music there. And so my roots, as you put it, have played a big part in my music, and how I approached my music, and how I connect with my music. A lot of my starting points have been roots music, traditional folk music, and then there are tributaries from there. So I take a lot of inspiration from there, not just from there, but it's one of my kind of strong inspirational starting points. And sometimes you don't hear it directly in the music. You know, I may not make a root sounding song, but somewhere in there, in the process of that, there might have been a groove, or there might have been a rhythm, or there might have been, you know, a conversation with someone that I had back home. A lot of the stories that I write songs about are based on stories either from Zambia or more broadly, you know, the continent. And I draw a lot of inspiration from the continent musically, story wise. I'm really keen to kind of explore and to celebrate our stories, and so that has formed a big part of how I make my music and what I make my music about. I have released 2 full albums to date, Shiwezwa and Quiet Revolutions. Shiwezwa was in 2014 and Quiet Revolutions was in 2017, and I am just in the process of releasing a twin EP. The first EP was released in September of 2023, called All Shades of the Sun, and the next EP is going to be released next year in 2024, and it's called Chasing Shadows. I don't know if I have a favorite. I am currently really enjoying my current EP, All Shades of the Sun. Not necessarily because it's my favorite, but because I feel that it's so much a reflection of how I am feeling about myself, how I'm feeling about the world right now, and how I'm trying to understand and process the world through the lens of being a mother, through the lens of being a woman, through the lens of being a human, you know, political human, who is concerned about things that are happening in the broader landscape of our humanity. I feel that this current project is kind of like a culmination of the last 2 albums, and creatively for me. I feel like the first album was a real exploration of who I was in my very distinct components of Namvula. You know, I am partly this, I am partly that. And I was really trying to understand how I, particularly my connection to Zambia as a child of the diaspora, and really exploring that connection. And the second album was really, a much more nuanced musically, but also very much, you know, aligned to our stories as women. I was really, really interested in the feminine lens. And I feel like this third project is very much, I feel like it's much more vulnerable. I feel like I am exposing like a jugular much more openly. I feel like I am being bolder in the things that I'm allowing myself to say and to speak about. You know, I feel like I'm being much more political. overtly political questioning. And I feel a lot of that has come out of becoming a mother, and the process that I've, that the kind of the introspection and an outward lookingness, if you would, that brings with it, and so this current EP, this current project is really dear to my heart right now. It's also it was also a project that was born out of like the isolation of the pandemic. So in a sense, it allowed for a lot more thought, I guess. I don't want to say that the other albums are not thoughtful, but I think the silence around that the pandemic brought with it, and the stopping and the stillness, allowed a kind of deeper questioning and allowed a lot more time to like look at every word, look at every lyric, think about really deeply about whether that's what I was trying to say, and whether that's how I wanted to present what I was trying to say. What is it like for me to work on an album? At times it's very, very exciting. I love being in the studio. I love recording. I love seeing the culmination of a lot of work and kind of seeing it all come together into this beautiful tapestry. I love the collaborative aspect of it. I think the thing that I dislike the most is the release, the release process. As exciting as it is to get projects out into the world, I find it a very extremely vulnerable time. And also, working with all the algorithms and the marketing aspect and, and that side of it, which just to me feels very uncreative. There's things around the release, like making the videos and that kind of content, which is fun and creative. But I don't enjoy the kind of release process, partly because I don't have a label. So a lot falls on my shoulders and it's pretty admin heavy. But I love the creativity of making an album. And this particular EP, The All Shades of the Sun and The Chasing Shadows, has been much more collaborative than the previous two albums, and that has been really, really wonderful, because it's allowed me, it's just allowed a musical depth to my work that I haven't experienced before and haven't had before. I was collaborating with the producer and bass player Liran Donin, who produced the last two albums, and it was just a really challenging, in the best way in the best sense of the word, a really challenging process, a really, really creatively joyous and enjoyable process. So yeah, that's what it's like for me in a nutshell. My musical growth, I think I've touched on before. I spoke about the first album being a real kind of exploration of who I was as a child of the diaspora, and then, and musically quite diverse. And the second album musically was more coherent and cohesive, but really traced an arc of the feminine experience. I was trying to look at what it was to be woman from birth up until death and beyond, and cyclically, what it was to be woman. So I was looking at stories of women that I had met, grandmothers, young women, women who'd been forced into prostitution, grandmothers who'd stood up to rebels in Sierra Leone, my niece, who at the time when I wrote a song about her was kind of about to enter into her teenage years. So all of that has came into Quiet Revolutions, the second album. And this one, as I spoke about, is much more of a synthesis, I think, of all of that process musically. I think there's been a lot of letting go, of a need to prove to prove myself or to be held by a certain style of music, a certain way of making music, a certain type of music that I felt I had to create, whether I felt it as in the pressure was internally myself or I felt it from the outside. And I think with this current project, I've been able to let go of a lot of expectations that I felt were actually constraining my creativity. And that's been really, really liberating to be able to just say, I'm going to make what I want and what I feel I need to, I'm going to say what I feel I need to say. And the people who are in for the ride are in for the ride, and the people who want to jump off the ship will jump off the ship, and that's just the nature of things. And I'm not here as an artist to please people. That's not what I feel my role is as an artist. I don't feel I need to pander to a certain expectation of the type of music I should make. I feel that I need to speak my truth, and I feel that I need to speak the world as I see it. And I think that's a really liberating place for me to make music from. And I don't think that would have happened without all of the other stuff that came before. Everything is process. Everything is part and forms the bedrock of who you are today. So me feeling this way would not have been possible without the creative processes that I've been through before on the other music that I've written and other projects that I've been involved in. So I have had a hiatus, a pretty long hiatus since becoming a mum. Things really slowed down, and it kind of came in tandem with the pandemic. And my second child was born during the pandemic, and so things really slowed down a lot for me, and kind of there was a lot of reconfiguring of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to navigate my career. So really, right now, I'm just very grateful to be releasing. I am very grateful to be having shows coming up. I'm lining up 2024 tour dates. It's pretty much very local at the moment to where we live. I'm not going abroad very much because I have a 2-year-old and I can't, and I have 2 small children, and I can't really leave for long periods of time, and that's fine. And that's the way it is. So right now I'm just really, really pleased to be doing these things, to be touring again, to be releasing again. There's a couple of projects that I'm involved in that feel very close to my heart, musical projects to do with perinatal mental well-being, music in the perinatal mental well-being space. And that feels really, really good to me to be involved in that, and another theatre project that's a collaborative theatre and music project. So those are really cool things to be involved in. The things that I feel on paper have been big milestones. I sang in a project with the late Huma Sakela. I've toured around Europe. I've played at big festivals, and all that has been great. But actually, it's the small things that are milestones for me. It's the fact that, I can go and I can play a show in a small venue, and people will cry, or people will come up to me afterwards and say, we didn't understand that song because you sung it in your mother's tongue, but it moved me so much. And for me, those are the milestones, when I can go and take my music to people who may never have heard my music, who may never have visited Zambia, who don't know my story, and I can move them and touch them in some way and make them feel connected, not just to me, but to themselves and to the other people in the room. And by that broader connection, then to other people in in this world that we are existing in. I feel those are the milestones. If I can look at somebody and feel that their heart has opened just a little bit more because of my music, or because I have played a show and they have felt touched by my music and their soul has cracked open a little bit wider, that is a milestone to me. If I can play in a space where it's dead quiet and everybody is watching and everybody is listening and the room is silent and with you, that for me is a milestone. And I think it takes a lot of courage to keep doing what we're doing. I think it's taken me a lot of courage to keep doing what I'm doing through various challenges, through mothering 2 children and kind of still doing what I'm doing and still making music and still having shows and still touring and still releasing is a milestone for me. So yeah, there are the big ones, but the multitude of smaller ones, maybe on paper, but big in my heart, are the things that keep me going. Yo Maps has been on our playlist. Sampa is on our playlist. I love Mumba. I always love his music. I love James Sakala. Those are people who kind of frequent our playlists. The amazing thing right now is that we've got some pretty big exports, coming out of the country. If you want to talk about it in economic terms, we've had the very well-deserved resurgence of The Witch, and they're touring, and obviously Sampa the Great is huge, and Yo Maps is he's blasting through, and he recently did a tour in the UK, and so all of this is, it contributes financially, obviously directly, because people are getting paid, and the money is going into people's pockets, and they're then able to spend it and circulate it around the economy, and people pay taxes and all of that stuff. But also beyond that, it's like we are showcasing the wealth of our country, and our country is not that well known, abroad. It's not, I think the West Africans have been supremely successful at exporting themselves. South Africa's a major powerhouse, and it's just really great when we can be like, hey, this is Zambia, this is Zambian music, this is Zambian culture, and people are able to say, so this is Zambia, and this is Zambian music, and be able to kind of envisage what aspects of the wealth of the country, and be introduced to the wealth of the heritage, the wealth of music, and hopefully through these big names that are making it on international platforms, people will start to root around a bit more. Mumba has been touring in North Africa. He was playing in, I think, Egypt or Tunisia or somewhere. He did a show with Sona Jabarte, the big West African musician, female kora player, and she's huge. And my hope is that people just explore more through these musicians who are taking Zambia into the international sphere, and through that they can see how wealthy Zambia is, how much Zambia has to offer, in terms of culture, in terms of tradition, in terms of music, in terms of natural beauty. So that's what I see the value being, and locally, Zambia forms such music forms such an integral part of Zambia's tapestry. It forms such an integral part of the way that people move through life. You know, there's music everywhere, music in churches, music in the bars, music on, you know, the radio is always on. And that in itself is just, it feeds the economy. It feeds the economy financially. It feeds the economy in terms of like spiritually, and I don't mean spiritually necessarily religiously. I just mean you listen to music and you feel good, you feel connected, and when you feel good and you feel connected, you are a happier and better human. And that's why music is such an important part to every culture. You know, every culture has music. It's a necessary part of our existence as human beings. So yeah, you can talk about economy in financial terms, but you can also talk about economy in terms of well-being, in terms of the wealth of culture and the wealth of heritage and the wealth of tradition. And I think, you know, if we can broaden the understanding of economy beyond purely finance to encompass these other aspects as well, then we'd, you know, the value of the arts might be placed a little bit higher, and maybe a little bit more investment would be put into them. You can follow me on social media at Namvula Sings, and you can catch my music on Bandcamp and pre-order the vinyl if you're vinyl lovers for the new EP on Bandcamp, which is namvula.bandcamp.com. I have a website, www.namvula.com, and you can listen to the albums and the new EP on all the major streaming platforms, digital streaming platforms. Thank you so much, Inutu, for having me on your podcast. It's been a pleasure speaking to your questions, and thank you for listening.